Hello, welcome to the Capitol Report on NTD television. I'm Steve Lance. President Biden has recovered from the CCP virus. He met with reporters and White House staffers in the Rose Garden to announce his recovery. Here's NTD's Melina Wisecup with more.
President Biden this afternoon welcomed by an enthusiastic crowd of White House staffers and journalists as he announced he's tested negative this morning for COVID-19. The president quarantined for 5 days with mild-like symptoms. He used his first in-person appearance today to tout his administration's efforts for staving off the virus.
My administration has made billions of dollars in funding available to improve ventilation in our schools and our public buildings. We've made tests widely available so you can take one before attending a large indoor gatherings or visiting with high-risk individuals. We've made high-quality masks available for free, so you should consider wearing a mask.
The president contracted the virus despite being fully vaccinated, and while some Americans and doctors are skeptical of the vaccine's effectiveness and its side effects, President Biden defended the White House's aggressive push for people to get the shot.
But the reality is that BA.5 means many of us are still going to get COVID, even if we take the precautions. That doesn't mean we're doing anything wrong.
The president is now back in the Oval Office. On the top of his agenda is a highly anticipated call with Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping this Thursday.
The president wants to make sure that the lines of communication with President Xi remain open because they need to. There's issues where we can cooperate with China on, and then there's issues where obviously there's friction and tension.
The two leaders last spoke in March. The White House has been mulling whether to waive tariffs on the country. These tariffs were imposed under the Trump administration to hold China accountable for stealing U.S. intellectual property and other unfair trade practices. But now the Biden administration is considering lifting these tariffs as a way to deal with inflation. White House officials are reluctant to say whether tariff talks will come up in this week's conversation between Xi and Biden.
Well, I'm not going to speak to what the president's going to cover during the call, but what I will say this is that the president is focused on trying to address inflation.
And officials have avoided answering questions over the past few days about what kind of impact waiving China tariffs would have on lowering costs here at home. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Wisecup, NTD News.
The Federal Reserve today made a major move to head off inflation, but this will greatly affect many consumer and business loans. The Fed hiked interest rates by 3/4 of a point for a second straight time. This means even higher interest costs for mortgages, credit cards, student loans, and business loans. A 30-year fixed-rate mortgage rate averaged about 5.5% earlier this month. That's up sharply from under 3% about a year ago. The rate hike follows a 4-decade high inflation rate at 9.1%. Economists are warning a potential recession later this year or next, and many Americans already feel they are in a recession. But Fed Chair Jerome Powell has a different opinion.
I do not think the U.S. is currently in a recession. We're not trying to have a recession, and we don't think we have to.
Earlier today, I sat down with Pennsylvania Congressman John Joyce to talk about the Fed hiking interest rates and the looming likelihood of a recession. He shares with us how his constituents are feeling the pain from the current economic downturn. Congressman John Joyce, thank you so much for joining us.
It's great to be with you today.
Congressman, we're seeing back-to-back the Fed raising the interest rate here, 0.75%. What do you think the short-term effects are going to be when we see this happen?
It's going to be access to funds and resources. And the effect of the increased interest rates affects, again, all ability to loan and purchase. And that impact is going to slow down business expansion. We're hearing it from the business community. It also impacts the ability to purchase homes as we see rising mortgage rates, which correlate with that. And the individual ability to obtain a mortgage as we see the prices continue to escalate in housing, and even further to be able to purchase a home. My constituents are feeling this. Actually, I think all Americans are feeling this right now.
Congressman, GDP numbers are expected to come out tomorrow. All reports right now say that they will look rather dismal. If in fact we do see negative growth, to you, does this mean that we're in a recession?
I think all the indicators and what my constituents are telling me shows that we are heading to a recession. And if it hasn't already started, it's right around the corner. My constituents are faced with rising gasoline prices, rising energy prices, rising food prices. They're having to make hard decisions. Are they going to be able to make the purchases for their kids to go back to school? Or are they going to have money to fill their gas tank? And those decisions indicate on all parameters to me that because of the reckless spending that the Democrats have done, we have accelerated into a recession. These are difficult times, and we as Republicans have to work to rein the Democrats in. This reckless spending has only accelerated the problem. Inflation is a tax on every one of my constituents. Democrat, Republican, each of them face inflation of over 9%. We've seen how this has affected the mortgage market with increased mortgages. We've seen how this has affected gasoline prices, food prices. There's not an American who's exempt from this runaway inflation.
Congressman, your district also includes a significant amount of farmland in Pennsylvania. If you could tell us, what are you hearing from the farmers in your district?
Just last weekend, I was in the dairy farms in Bedford County in central Pennsylvania, and I know the impact because what these farmers are paying for increased diesel to run their equipment, they're making hard choices that's making it difficult for them to make a living. These dairy farmers are some of the hardest working individuals I've ever been around in my entire life. They're working from sunup till sundown. They're supplying us with a vital nutrient in dairy that provides us with great sustainable energy in a food. And that's so important that we recognize how important the dairy industry is. But right now, they're facing what inflation is doing to them. They're seeing the increased costs for fertilizer. They're seeing the increased cost for diesel fuels to run their equipment. They're seeing the increased labor costs. And this is going to affect each and every American. And right now, it is affecting the agricultural community in Pennsylvania.
Congressman, heavy government spending is a blueprint, essentially, for many failed socialist systems and governments. Do you think that your colleagues on the Hill, the Democrats up there, are starting to realize this?
I think all Americans realize that the Democrat American Rescue Plan fueled this fire. We realize that this reckless spending has to be reined in. And with that reckless spending, the impact on each and every American is being felt right now. Whether it's rising energy costs, rising food costs, Americans across the board are feeling that. And Democrats have to realize that this is their responsibility, and we need to be able to come together and work together and stop this reckless spending to be able to control the inflation that right now is plaguing America.
Congressman John Joyce, thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
United States Senator Cynthia Lummis is a member of the Senate Banking Committee. With the U.S. economy struggling to get its footing, we had a chance to speak with the senator. Here's a look. Senator Cynthia Lummis, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Senator, the Biden administration is pushing back on, despite historical indicators saying that we are likely in a recession, that we're not. What's to make of that?
Well, if you look at the fact that we know that our economy is contracting, we know that inflation is at a 40-year high. We see people not being able to afford houses, not being able to afford gasoline and diesel. You only have to look around to see that we're heading in this direction. And yet the Biden administration has its head in the sand. It will do nothing to prevent this impending recession. Now, add to that the fact that we are now over 100% of GDP in trouble. And anytime a nation gets over 100% of GDP in trouble, that nation is going to suffer. So we're seeing all of these come together at the same time, and they can't deny, without people questioning their logic, that we are heading for a recession.
So switching gears a little bit, I want to ask you about, there's rumblings that the Biden administration is considering rolling back the Trump-era China tariffs to try to ease inflation. Do you think that the ends would justify the means?
I do not. I think that we have to continually monitor and respond to China's advancing aggressions. They are tending to be slow. They have a long time frame to work with, and they tend to move slowly. But now that they see the United States becoming subservient, backing off, not being strong, compromising its own economy, they're going to fill that gap. They're doing it in Southeast Asia, in the China Sea. They're doing it in Africa by building airports and roads. They are buying farmland in the United States, in Florida, en masse. It's happening so quickly now that they're escalating their presence everywhere. And as we know, 90% of the semiconductor chips that are so important in this country are produced in Taiwan, but 0% of the highly technical chips we need are produced in the United States. We are cutting off our nose despite our face, and we're letting China fill the gap. So I think this is the wrong time to look at the tariff issue.
Senator Cynthia Lummis, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Passing sweeping legislation today, a group of bipartisan senators vowing to boost U.S. chip production to outcompete China. But some lawmakers say there are critical errors in the bill that could subject the U.S. to CCP espionage. NTD's Iris Tao brings us more.
The yeas are 64, the nays are 33, and the motion to concur with an amendment is agreed to.
With broad bipartisan support, the Senate on Wednesday finally greenlighting a long-awaited semiconductor bill.
But this is one of the most significant long-term thinking bills we've passed in a very long time.
Now known as the CHIPS and Science Act, the $52 billion bill aims to address a chip shortage in the U.S. and reduce reliance on China.
This is a bad day for President Xi and the Chinese Communist Party.
And a group of bipartisan senators calling today's move a big step toward recognizing CCP threats.
The slumbering giant that is America has finally awakened to the challenge that we face from the People's Republic of China, their aggressive posture in the region, and the potential they would have of cutting off our access to advanced semiconductors.
But others say the bill is still too weak on China. In a Wednesday statement, Republican Senator Marco Rubio calls out Senate Democrats for blocking his amendments seeking to counter Beijing's espionage and intellectual theft. He writes, quote, "No one should be surprised when we hear stories of Beijing stealing U.S. technology funded by this bill, or companies producing more chips in China, even as they receive money from the taxpayers." And Senator Maria Cantwell responds by telling NTD that this bill focuses on innovation, while other actions are still being discussed.
So we're very confident in this first step. The conference could include other language.
And after passing in the Senate, the legislation is now moving to the House, where Speaker Nancy Pelosi has said it does have the support for passing. And other key lawmakers have also said they could send the bill to Biden's desk by the end of this week. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Iris Tao, NTD News.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.